Okay, so far in this chapter, we've done linear equations, solving for x, which I gave you guys kind of a half example of that because everybody in here knows how to solve linear equations. Today we're going to look at solving quadratic equations, and I'm going to give you more examples for this. But there's three ways to solve quadratic equations. There's by factoring, the x method. And what do you do? Does anybody remember what you do with the factors to solve for x? Set them to something.
0.
Set them equal to 0. Then we do the quadratic formula. That's for the ones that you can't factor, because you can't factor every quadratic. And that's the song that if you had me, negative b, yes or minus the square root, b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a. Good. That was quiet and calm. I love it. And then the last one that you can use sometimes, you can't use it all the time, but if you can, it's a quick and easy way, is to use square roots, because what do square roots undo? Squares. Okay? So quadratics are squares. So the first one we're going to talk about is factoring. Solve by factoring. The reason we have to do quadratic formula is because not all quadratics will factor. So, oh dear, this flew right down. Okay, so if you get something like this, 2x squared plus 9x plus 7 equals 3. The first thing you want to do before you factor is you need to make it equal to 0. So I need to move this 3 over. How am I going to move this positive 3? Subtract it. And I'm going to subtract it from its like term, which is 7. So I have 2x squared plus 9x plus 4 equals 0. Everybody good with that? Okay, now, since I'm telling you this one is done by factoring, this one does factor. So, can I do the shortcut with this factoring?
No.
No. I had some people on their last test, they were doing shortcuts on everything. Remember, you can only do the shortcut if this a term is 1. So there's not a number written there. So this one we have to do the full out x method. A times c on the top is 8. And then your b is 9. 8 times 1 is 8, and 8 plus 1 is 9. So I have 2x squared plus 8x plus 1x plus 4. I can take a 2x out of the first group, leaving me with x plus 4. What do I take out of the second group? A 1, leaving you with x plus 4. So your factors are 2x plus 1 and x plus 4. And all of that is equal to what? 0. I'll give you a minute to write that down. Now, a minute ago I asked you, what do you do to now solve for x? We haven't factored. These two factors we're going to set equal to 0. And you're going to get two different answers for my x value. So I have 2x plus 1 equals 0, and x plus 4 equals 0. So here I subtract 1 over, so I have 2x equals negative 1. Divide by 2, divide by 2, x is equal to negative 1/2. And here I subtract my 4, so x is equal to negative 4. And that's solving for x when you can factor. Easy enough? So basically it's what you already know how to do plus this step. Okay, let me show you a different type of factoring one that's actually a little bit easier to factor, but you can solve by factoring.
Wait, go back up for like 5 seconds. Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, look at this problem here. If I give you 6x squared minus 3x equals 0. Whenever you have an x squared and an x, you only have two options. You can either factor or quadratic formula. If you can factor, I'd always factor. I think it's a little bit faster and you're less likely to make a mistake. So in this case, this is not a difference of two squares. It doesn't have your three terms. but does it have something in common that you can factor out? A 3x. So I'm going to factor out a 3x, leaving me with 2x minus what? What do I have to replace here? 1. Once you get it factored like this, you're just going to follow the same steps as setting your factors equal to 0. So I have 3x equals 0, and I have 2x minus 1 equals 0. So here I divide by 3, x is equal to 0. Here's add 1, 2x equals 1, x equals 1/2. And that's that. So this is the easier factoring, but for some reason it throws everybody for a loop when you see something that looks different. Always look to factor something out. Okay, how do we feel about factoring and solving?
We're ready to move on.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. I feel like it's Friday. I have jeans on, I'm confused. Okay, so next one that we have in here I think is a square root. I wrote it out of order up here. Sorry for those of you who are order people. But if I have something like this, 4x squared equals 12. So I don't have an x and an x squared. I just have an x squared. Whenever you have just an x squared, you can use a square root. If you have an x and an x squared, you have to choose either factoring or quadratic formula. But when you have just an x squared, the way you can use a square root is first part, get the x squared or the squared part by itself. So I'd have to divide by 4. So I have x squared equals 3. And now, how do we undo a square? You said it a minute ago, and it's on the board. Square root. So once I get the squared part, I shouldn't just say x squared by itself, but whatever part is being squared by itself, I can square root, and I get x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 3. And that's that for the squared part. I'm going to look to see if you have one. Hang on.
Is that the last example?
No, we haven't even done the quadratic formula.
I thought you said we only had 4 examples.
I know I lied.
Yeah.
I've only given you 3.
I know.
So the fourth one is going to be what?
It just better be just one more.
Or what?
Or I will.
It is one more, but or what? All right, ready for quadratic formula?
I think so.
I'll write it on the board, but you're going to have it memorized at some point in your life if you don't already know. X equals, I have a hard time saying it without saying b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, I have a hard time just saying it.
I bet you could do it. Just say it.
X equals
No, you're saying
X equals negative b
X
minus
equals
square root
negative
b
b.
minus 4.
Minus the square root.
That's good. See, you can't do it without singing it either.
X equals.
You
X
have to say
equals
it fast.
negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I can't do it. I'm sorry, I'm musical inside.
It's like trying to say the lyrics to a song.
Right, yes, you can. Okay, here's your last example.
Woo!
X squared plus 3x equals 9. Okay, what's the first step we had to do when we factored? What did you have to make it equal to? 0. Same idea with quadratic formula. So I need to move this 9 over, and when I do that, I get x squared plus 3x minus 9 equals 0. Okay, before we start, let's talk about what is a, b, and c. Well, a is going to be the number that's in front of your x squared. B is going to be obviously the number in front of the x, and c is this. We sure know this from factoring with the x method, but just in case. So what number do I use for a? 1. Okay, a, b, and c are all numbers. So if I have, I'm just going to write down what A, B, and C are. A is 1. What is B? 3. And what's C? -9.
I know this is the
Not
last.
right now. Come back. Come back. I'm on my last example. Come back. Like 3 minutes.
Okay.
Make sure you like come
I know. You're the one that wants this over, and now you're trying to make me pause. No. Okay. So we have A, we have B, we have C. We have to use x equals -b. So what am I using for -b? -3 plus or minus the square root. What is b squared? Don't write b squared. Write the actual number. What is b squared? What is it?
9.
9. Okay, so it's 3 squared. Don't write 3 squared. Write 9. Minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is -9. All over, what's 2 times a?
1, 2.
2.
It's 2.
So you want to work inside the radical part first. So inside the radical, I get 9 plus what? 36?
I thought it was minus 36.
You have a -4
Oh,
times 1 times -9.
So it's 9 plus.
So I have
So it comes up 4.
-3 plus or minus the square root of 45, all divided by 2. And in my work, I have us simplifying the radical. I'm actually okay if we want to type this in and just get decimals today in this. So when we type that in, well, when we simplify the radical, 45 is 9 and 5. What's the square root of 9? 3. So when I do this, I have 3 plus or minus 3 times the square root of 5, all divided by 2. Because we just did the square root of 9.
To do that?
I'm going to let you either choose to do this. That's how my work is, or you can write it as a decimal. So in that case, you would have just typed in your calculator -3 plus the square root of 45, and then enter divided by 2, or I would maybe simplify the radical. I think all of the ones today are pretty easy to simplify the radical.
Where did you give them on?
I did the square root of it.
Oh, you put it up front.
Yep.
That's awesome. That was my first job.
Well, guess what? You're going to get more practice. Okay, here is your work for today. I want you to come check your work in my book, especially my 6th hour, because you're learning on a video 6th hour.
What if I boycott?
Then you get a bad grade, and that's on you, not me. Okay, so check work in binder. I can't write.
Can we go? Yay. Love ya.